Hello! Name that movie? Anybody? Anybody? It's Mrs. Doubtfire. We already have event logs. I'm going to make sure that this is not a recurrence of last week. Live service received a video signal. Preview to live. We are coming at you live. All right, cool. I think everything's working. Hey, y'all. It's Meg. Rachel's coming. She was grabbing something to eat. We have had a ridiculously and excitingly busy week, which is carrying through today. We actually are borrowing some space in the Rapid City campus of Black Hills State University. Whoop, whoop. Thank you, Black Hills State University. And because we're in Rapid today, we were live on the radio, not recorded live, but actually live on the radio on South Dakota Public Broadcasting for their Brown Bag book series, talking all about IX leadership and what that means. So Rachel went to get some lunch and she is now back and here with us.
Well, there's no endorsement implied.
It's we are not affiliated with
Checks.
or representing checks.
And actually, I prefer the homemade version, where you accidentally get big chunks of chocolate / peanut butter on them.
When I'm feeling particularly mean, I bring that to the office at Christmas time, and then Rachel sort of hates me for doing that to her.
The entire bag.
I'm trying to get this so it's not.
Okay,
That's pretty good, huh?
I think so. We're still kind of back. Maybe I could turn the lights on.
So we've been wild and crazy. We're here in Rapid City today, and so let's start with some announcements. Shelly and I were just in Billings. We had a great time. Shout out to the Billings Chamber, St. B's Patient Access Department in Billings, Connections, and Lynn Ann Henderson. Where else did we go, Shell?
1,000 places. The Chamber.
Oh, Biz to Biz, Beth Caldwell, who's the president of Biz to Biz. I said the chamber. Jake's, thank you for feeding us. Cooligans, thank you for feeding us. Stacked, thank you for feeding us. Oh, Four Seasons Realty, shout out to you. Thank you for lunch. Anyway, we had a wild whirlwind tour. And it was great, met a ton of new people, a lot of new exciting opportunities in that area. And so if any of you have recently joined us from the promotion I was doing because Shelly told me to do it. Hi, Kristen. We're happy to have you. Thanks for joining us in our group and hope you love it. And, okay, so let's see. I was in Billings, and then we were on the radio today. I talked about that, and then
I was in Sioux Falls. Let's see. It was cool. I met Maggie Owens. She's an incredible consultant that works on culture and organizational development. Super, super awesome. She's declined today, so she's not on. But anyway, she's fantastic. So I had some great conversations with her. I met with another friend of mine, Steve Erhenbach. He runs the SDSU Foundation, and we were looking at some really fun stuff with him, and he fit me into his calendar, so I appreciate that very much. And then I got to go to a Hero Club meeting. It's a part of the C-Suite Network, and that was it's kind of a community leaders meeting, just to invite some people to see what they, which was really a fun meeting, really a lot of great people there. Got to meet a lot of new faces, which I hadn't met. I invited Billy Sutton, the Democratic candidate for governor, to join us. I happened to teach for his Leadership Institute a couple weeks ago, so I thought he would enjoy that event. So I hosted him there and just got to meet a bunch of really powerful and amazing leaders at that event. So, gosh, is that all?
is that all? Yeah, that's all.
Woof. Great to be back.
Yeah. So,
Sorry for eating bad food in front of you.
teasing you with bad food. I've been checking these event logs because last week with the problems that we were having. So this just came up here. Shelly, can you still see us? Can you guys, for those of you who are logged in, is it working? Can you hear us? Are we timeouty or anything weird going on?
It'll be 20 second delay. We're good? We're good. Shelly says we're good.
All right, sweet.
Whatever Shelly says.
I know, Shelly's the life accountant here.
Okay.
Okay, so one place that we were in Billings, first thing on Monday morning was the very tippy top of the second tallest building in Billings. During a thunderstorm. Oh, a couple times you look scrambled. Oh, good now. Okay, thanks, Kristen. During a thunderstorm, and so it was thundering and lightning. And for those of you who know Shelly, you know that is not one of her most favorite events to have to experience. And so she was really strong and brave and didn't even make any scared noises while we were up there. But I will say that was we were in a glass box.
Cool.
Well, it was cool, but it was a little bit unnerving because you hear the loud crack of the thunder, but it sounds like you're like a teeny tiny human inside of a glass. Mm-hmm. And I didn't love it, so I can't imagine how brave Shelly had to be to love it. But we were in there with Aaron Flint. Aaron Flint is the host of Montana Talks Radio, and we were a distinguished and honored guest of Mr. Flint's, and we talked about really a lot about generational differences and what does that actually mean. There are 4 generations in the workplace. Is it that millennials have to figure out how to deal with those crotchety old baby boomers and Gen Xers? Is it that the baby boomers need to start using their phones more and figure out how to assimilate, join the technology revolution that started 20 years ago. Or are Gen Xers expected to sort of pander to both sides and help everybody figure it out? So we had a great conversation, Aaron and I did, about generational differences, and so Shelly thought that we could continue that conversation here for a theme on the week.
So be sure that whatever you tell Shelly first thing on Monday morning is something that you love.
Yes.
That's going to show up back 2 days later.
That's what you're going to talk about on Wednesday. I actually do love talking about generational differences in the workplace, even though it makes me really roll my eyes.
You know what's been interesting, can I just say, about thinking about generations? So I was working with, been talking to people, you're talking to people all week. Not once did this come up. Not once did we talked about turnover a lot. We talked about how one company said, if we could just keep people for 9 months or a year, they tend to stick. I'm like, yeah, that's usually that transition phase time frame. And there's things we could do to help, whatever. But literally, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe or more, it was you couldn't have a conversation without this generational differences coming up. And I was just really when I'm reflecting back about this week, you talked with radio jockey on it, but honestly, when it came down to people actually trying to solve problems, I think it's almost assumed that differences are there and that you just have to think, you know what I mean? Before it was well, how do we make these people work together? And now it seems much more holistic. They recognize that there's different ways people work, but it wasn't specifically talked about. It was different.
Yeah, I think that, it's what does Jeff say? Change or die? No.
Yeah, probably.
What's he saying about
today is the
adapt or die. So, you either sort it out. And so I think, of course, there has to be, as a business community, we're making advancements on generations in the workplace. And I think those advancements are going in the right direction of, it doesn't really matter what your generation is. What matters is how you like to work. And that's why culture types and Kurt's change transition model is so impactful, especially with 4 different generations in the workplace. because the reality is, well, it's dependent upon how each individual likes to work and then how that wraps up into the team. There are very different perspectives that come from each generation. So I think that culture types and KCTM really help bridge that gap of, or maybe, I don't know, bridge the gap, solve the problem or solve for the X, and where X is it really a generational thing? Well, yeah, there's some nuances to that, but we have a solution that works for all the people. So let's not so much worry about that generational thing. And then, I mean, the cool thing about 4 generations in the workplace is if we can learn how to work together and use all those different skill sets, not only do we have a really a broad range of cool skill sets and cool understandings of the way the world is, there are tons of stories to be shared. Like, there's nothing more, I think, impactful or, I don't know, heartwarming for me than to see my granddad telling stories to my kids about, wars that he lived through and had been drafted into, or, my grandpa talks about, they didn't have running water at all when he was growing up, and my grandma lived out in the middle of nowhere on a little sheep farm, and they literally killed, or raised everything that they ate, or raised and then killed. If you don't like the idea of killing animals, stop listening for a minute. So I think it's just really cool that we have an opportunity right now where there are 4 generations in the workplace, and there's all those stories to be told.
Can I tell a fun story about that? About different perspectives?
Yeah.
So I was reading this historical account of pioneer settlement, and there was this great conversation between these 2 old men back 150 years ago that said you can't trust a woman who grew up with indoor plumbing because they're clearly too they didn't live a hard enough life. They're not tough enough. So it's so interesting to see, like, that was their big generational difference, right? It was indoor plumbing and how that changed how tough you were. So anyway, it's fascinating that we still are talking about technological advances making people not, like me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. It's just that these generations are not like you, whether it's a previous generation or up and coming, generation. It's just that they're not like you. And I think the other really important thing to keep in mind is each generation is, by intent or accident, was designed for that point in time. We created millennials the way they are in the generalization of they'd rather text than talk. They don't have any personal skills. They don't know how to build relationships. Well, guess what? They've had a screen in front of their face that's at some point or another for the majority of their life. I am an elder millennial. I do not identify as an elder millennial. I identify as a Gen Xer, but that's here nor there. But I remember I was one of the first generations where we had computers in the school for most of the things, or a lot of the things that we did. We were in front of the screen all the time. That was how you were supposed to do things. If you didn't use the computer or learn how to type, you were failing. And so I think, then it's kind of ironic that we then say, well, let's hold them hostage about that. Like, you shouldn't be on your phone. But this week, I can't remember who told us this story. Somebody who works in the retail industry. Do you remember this story, Shelley? Where they were talking about millennials working in the retail industry and that they had a really hard time communicating with customers. Do you remember that? I can't remember who it was. They had a really hard time communicating with customers because this is how they're used to communicating with people. And so having a face-to-face conversation was a challenge. So I do think that, there's some potential for training different generations, looking at different generations and thinking about the skills that they need and what they need to be thinking about, and making sure that they actually have them and that we haven't sort of unintentionally robbed them of those skills. So, I think in terms of generational differences, we have to appreciate the opportunity to work, with whatever it is. however many years worth of experience all in one room. And that if you use culture types and really think about the way people like to work, you can actually cut out kind of the baloney of, oh, we don't get along because I'm older than you or younger than you, and really start to not only work more efficiently, but then share and be innovative together, because you're not constantly trying to manage this stress of, I'm not supposed to work well with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Someone just posted something similar to this, but about gender differences on LinkedIn, saying, the U.S. soccer team won the World Cup. There's this huge conversation about parity and how they're paid 38 cents to the U.S. men's soccer team's dollar, but they've won more World Cups. They've got more endorsements and this kind of thing. So they're talking about, so someone mentioned gender parity and how can we give women more of a leg up in business the way that the U.S. soccer team is trying to get a leg up for women. And I came back to the same kind of thing, though, that I said, if you look for differences in perspective and thought and ideas, then generations, gender, color, all falls away. Because if you're really looking at each other for what they can contribute that's different than what you already have, I think that's where the power is. And that's the culture type sort of philosophy. Like, how do you leverage each other's gifts instead of how can we separate each other into these little groups that then doesn't serve us. So I think generally speaking, the thing I love about culture types is, of course, it transects. Like, we know, we mentioned Jeff Hazlett, or Meg mentioned Jeff Hazlett earlier. He's a friend of ours who runs the C-Suite Network, and he's as chaotic as they come, and he's a baby boomer, right? That era.
Probably early Gen X.
Right? No, I think I don't know. But yeah, he's right on the raggedy edge there. And so, and then we know young people. What are they? Millennials.
Zillennials and nesters. Our kids are nesters.
Okay, so Zillennials who are entering the workforce now, they are social creatures. That's why they love social media. They have hardcore social networks. They're just not in person. And so there's as many stabilizers in that generation as there are in older generations. It's expressed differently. So that's why I love looking at it from a culture type perspective, because then we say, it doesn't really matter what tools they're using, if they're using face-to-face, digital, or whatever tools they might have. It's that this is the kind of work environment they need to be successful. And that's really what we're all interested in. How do we grow our business? How do we grow our company? What's the business goals we're trying to achieve? And how do we leverage the people we have to do that? And I think once you start looking at it in that way, then all these other things sort of, these other buckets that we've created sort of fall away. Yeah, become vastly less important.
Yeah, and I think the perspective of people, who are, I would say even under the age of 45, the perspective is really a lot about they're accountable. So what we hear all the time is, oh, well, these young people just aren't accountable. They don't want to work. They don't, they want flexible schedules and all this stuff. Yeah, well, sure. But they're still accountable. There's still some butt-kicking people under the age of 45. I mean, my God, that's got to represent, at least 80%, yeah, of the workforce. And so they clearly, our economy is doing pretty good. And so clearly they're not just a bunch of, don't say it. I don't know why we say way worse things than that.
Shelley said you cannot curse like that on the batteries. Meg cursed in front of a room of people in Billings, and literally Shelley is having PTSD from it. She is having terrible nightmares about the fallout from that. So
anyway,
for Shelley's benefit,
there are people who just struggle to succeed.
There you
let's
go.
say. But that is not all the young people on the planet or in the country, and so
there's a lot of 45-year-olds that aren't succeeding.
So it's not that young people don't want to be held accountable or don't want to work hard. It's that their accountability perspective is different. And so unlike Loyalist generation, baby boomers, even Gen Xers, they don't really ride for the brand, or if they do, the brand is them. And so it's not that I don't care about what you're doing in your business, or I don't care about what the goals are to be successful. I want to know why it's important to me, the what's in it for me question. And then if you can answer that question, I'm game. I'm down for anything. And so I think that the for older generations, what you can do to help yourself understand the perspective of those younger people is to say, how do we create something that attracts the kind of accountability and loyalty that we want? And then for the younger generations to kind of broaden their perspective is say, listen, these people have been told for many years that you take a job and you stay in that job. That's how you be successful in your career, and you just wait your turn until you get to the point that you want to be in your career. But you work really hard and you wait your turn in that organization. So we've got people who have worked in organizations for their entire career, and that's fine. But the millennials need to understand or shift their perspective or broaden it to say, okay, so these people have been trained their whole lives to do exactly opposite of what I've been trained to do for my whole life. And so how can I ask the right questions to understand, what does loyalty look like? What does accountability look like? And then you get to decide if you want to be loyal and accountable to that. So it's really all about kind of shifting those perspectives. And then if you wrap culture types around that, and you understand the culture type of the person that you're talking to or the group of people, if you have a whole group of people, then you kind of know how to mold that message so they can actually hear what you're saying, and it's not like you're just shouting in the wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it all comes down to pulling off big goals together. And the only way to do that is to recognize that we all have different gifts, right? And that's the nice thing about culture types, is that we can leverage each other in a way that is meaningful and successful. Are you looking at the question?
I am, so keep talking.
Okay. I'm not talking. I should say my brain is working about a third speed today. I'm trying to get over some virus I have, so, which is why I'm eating randomly crap food at 2:30 in the afternoon. Let me see generation differences. I think for me, one of the big challenges is everybody still, there's two big things that we see in literature and in our experience, that regardless of how old you are or what generation you're from or even what culture type you are, everyone wants to feel valued and they want an opportunity to grow. And so those are two aspects that also transcend generations and culture types even. How that's expressed, though, has a lot perhaps to do with generation or culture type. And so that's one of the reasons why you can't just pretend that culture types don't matter or that generations completely don't matter, because to feel valued, but for us, like a stabilizer, we were just talking about this. Who were we talking about? So a stabilizer to feel like they're growing. Maybe let's use a welder as an example. You have someone who's a professional welder, and for them to grow, maybe to learn how to do stainless steel welding or aluminum welding, which is it's called TIG welding, I think. Don't quote me on that, but it's a totally different setup. So they're still learning, they're still growing, they're still developing their skills. That is perhaps a stabilizer example. A independent example might be you're a welder and you're going to go learn how to ride horses, like a totally different kind of growth.
Or underwater
welding, or something that feels super crazy, right? And so there's the ways that different culture types feel like they're growing, or their opportunities they want in growth are going to look different. So that's why it's cool to, even in that perspective, to embed that the technology of the younger generations and their comfort. We have an online academy that we have available for everyone that does programs with us. And for our IXAF certification, that's a resource for them to go through. But let me tell you, I'm sure if we looked at the differences between, our youngest member and our oldest, there's probably a different use pattern to those two people. And all of the videos we have on there are called micro learning units. They're like sub 5 minutes, more YouTube style of, hey, let's get to the point. We're going to talk about something important, and then we're going to give you more resources. The only reason we're doing that is because, well, I'm 45, Nick's 34, or 44, 34. We don't have the patience to wait. Like, so we're not 20, but we don't want to sit and watch a 20-minute video either. And so it's an interesting trend that we're all leaning more toward technology, which pushes maybe toward the younger generations. But I think it's also what a lot of us wanted anyway. So anyway, it's interesting.
That's a great point, because Aaron made that point actually when we were on the radio. He said that exact thing. He said, I mean, name one person who didn't say, boy, I'd sure like to take Friday afternoons off. Always, right? That was always the conversation. Like, before, I mean, maybe it didn't come up as often, or maybe it came up condescending, like, oh yeah, Bob, like we have time for that, ha.
Right.
But I do think that humans generally prefer the pay for performance as opposed to pay for time model. And so I really think that what the millennial generation is challenging us to do as a business community is think differently about how business can be successful. So one one sort of set of industries that we hear really the most, I would argue, reasonable sort of complaints about how do I create this culture for millennials that they'll stick to without ticking off people who have been in the business for a long time and without forsaking my production, are industries where there's required shift work. Mm-hmm. Or you have to be there a certain amount of, even like a bank, you have to be open 9 to 5, or or if you're in a mine. When I was in the mine has to run 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, less 12 days or something. I mean, it has to be running. And so my challenge to those organizations, and I had so many people tell me stories this week. I can't remember who this was either, but someone said, I think it was a manufacturing business, or maybe it was an electrician. I can't remember what it was, but they said, we know that it's a challenge, and we know that we still need to get our work done. And so what they did was change the way their scheduling is, so that there could be, time for people to be taking off more than just a weekend. And so they kind of offset their schedule so that people could work at different times of the month or different times of the year, so that you're not only getting Saturday and Sunday off, and everybody has a chance to go out and enjoy the outdoors or whatever is attractive to them. So there's a way to do it. I do think that the biggest challenge, the thing that we hear about the most from our clients, the biggest challenge with this, relaxed state of business is flexible schedule arrangements. And because some people believe in them, some people don't, then the people that, even if you put one in and you have a good policy, the people that believe in them use it. And then the people that don't believe in flexible schedules or don't want to use it, they don't. And then they're angry with the people that do, because there's this, you weren't in your office, you're supposed to be in your office, I'm in my office. So
do you think that's a culture type difference though? Because I bet the people that are more chaotic are more interested in a chaotic, flexible schedule. And the people that are more order tolerant would not be as interested. Or at least if it was flexible, they would want it to be flexible in the same way all the time. Like, I'm going to work 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. instead of 9 to 5. Or I'm going to take every Friday off and work extra days. Do you think that's related?
Oh yeah, I think personally, like for team dynamics and for the people, yeah, it has to do a lot with your culture type. I think for the organization though, it is a challenge to say, because then how do you say, well, stabilizer, you're right in the way you want things to happen, and independent, you're right, and fixer and organizer. So I just think from a company perspective, I'm just giving some grace to you folks who work in organizations and deal with this. It is a challenging thing to think about. How do you successfully implement it? My answer to that is it has all to do with accountability and the rule of Nunya. The rule of Nunya is it's none your business if someone's here or not here, unless it's actually directly and immediately impacting your ability to get your work done. And then I will take care of that as your supervisor. Anyway, HR tip of the day.
Yeah, because it is interesting though, because I think that like even in our office, we have 3 full-time people actually in Spearfit, and even that, I think we have that, our culture type differences really result in different work styles, work environments, and we figured out how to make that work. And so it's really interesting to think if we don't have any order tolerant people, but if we did, how that would express itself because if you have a stabilizer, they need to, this is what I think is hard about distributed teams, is that a lot of us are actually team oriented people. I think 60 some percent, right? And so to have a just totally distributed team, so I was reading about this morning, I think too, though, that's exactly the opposite challenge of then you have the independent, self-driven people that are like, this is my dream, I never have to see anybody. But then you have all the team people that are like basically going to implode over time unless they have some team arrangement where they see each other all the time, they connect in some way. So I think culture types could really inform these flex schedule plans in a more strategic way. You know what I mean?
Well, you would definitely know what to expect from each person on a team or within an organization.
Mm-hmm. Or even if you had like this one company has like 300 distributed employees, it's like, well, at least you could, if you knew everyone's culture type, you could say, or if you ended up having stabilizers or order tolerant people, you could say, okay, for people that want to connect, we're going to be on the video calls every Friday morning at 10. And then anyone who wanted to be there and be connected could, or whatever. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I think there could be some interesting ways to do flexible schedules, distributed workplaces, a little more successfully if they took culture types into account earlier, or maybe at the beginning to see what they needed. Or maybe they would never chase order tolerant people, or maybe you would have locations that you could be at geographically. I don't know. It's an interesting idea, I think.
Okay, so one question is, what is IX leadership's perspective on generation differences in the workplace? I would say we covered that. As an employer, how do you create a culture to retain employees of different generations with the current low unemployment rate? Well, different generations with the current low unemployment rate. Well, again, I just had a very interesting couple of conversations about the disparity between the low unemployment rate, but people not having enough employees, and then people still looking for work. So I would like to personally dig into that unemployment rate a little bit and see what all the factors are, because that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But anyway,
well, I think you're right. There are a lot of people that are unhappy with their job too. We've seen those numbers. So there's 60+% disengagement. So even though they're not unemployed, they might be looking around.
Right. You made me forget what the question was and what I was talking about.
Sorry.
Okay, so how do you create a culture to retain employees of different generations? So let's just throw out the current unemployment rate at the moment, because no matter what, that's a challenge.
Right, you want to do that anyway, regardless.
Well, whether there's a low unemployment rate or not. So the trap is so everybody's talking about this, it's low unemployment rate, it's really hard to find people. But when the unemployment rate is high and there's lots of people to be found, you just keep going through people because it doesn't matter. So you never actually create a good culture that way either. So I just think that using this unemployment rate is sort of this makes life harder or it makes life easier. It's hard both ways. So what's important to focus on is really, what is the culture you're creating in your business? Who are the people that you're looking to attract? What are you doing to retain them? And so I think no matter their generation, I mean, that's something certainly to take into account, because they might have a little bit different perspective on the world, generally speaking. But you can use the culture type assessment to really understand the people for their work preferences and their environment. And after all, in an organizational setting, that's what you're actually after. How is their brain making, I've been calling it purchasing decisions, because every choice they make, right, whether it's what kind of milk they buy, or what meetings they want to go to, or what kind of attitude they're going to have when they go to a meeting, those are all purchasing decisions. They're deciding on something. And so those culture types tell you that. How are people deciding what they want to be doing in terms of their work preference and the environment that they're in? And if you understand that, and then understand how the whole team works together. So, you might have 3 fixers and they make, decisions based on one thing, one set of work preferences and environment preferences. And then you've got organizers, that make decisions on basically the opposite set of premises. How do you make sure that everybody in that organization or in that department is on board with what you're doing? And that's a lot of asking questions, being transparent, making sure you're communicating with people. So I think that, I've lived through myself the generational stuff. I would say, in my experience anyways, particularly in blue collar work, there's a lot of like, I've been working on this pump for 45 years. I was working here before you were born. There is a lot of that, and that's really the key to that is, again, the rule of Nunya, and also just holding people accountable. Bob, we don't say that. Bob, we don't talk about that. But that's like that's a whole nother HR topic.
Right. But I think the other thing, when I was young and I felt the same way, like, I want to do something that means something, and I want to be more involved in the decision making. I mean, I remember being 20 and thinking that way, and having my first job and thinking I was being underutilized, and people didn't really get my potential, and I felt like I was doing this crap work that, that what didn't really suit me, and all of that's true. But what I think is actually to your point about, well, I was, I've been doing this since before you were born, that kind of negative talk is destructive. But I think the other way to turn that around is to say, you know what, you do have 40 years of experience. Tell me what you know. Connect the mentor. We talk a lot about reconnecting leaders with their people, because a lot of times the leaders are worried about business goals and the people are actually doing all the hard work on the ground. And so, but I think you could do the same thing in a big organization where you have older folks who are getting close to retirement and young people, and connecting them and creating a social engagement in that way. Because now that I'm 44 and I look back at that 20-year-old, I was like, you were a big dumb idiot. And I'm sure in 10 years I'll look back at my 44-year-old person and think, you're clueless. And so I think, respecting that and connecting, again, in the IX leadership sort of mentality of leverage what you have, I think that could be a really powerful way to overcome some of those, if you do have this huge range of people that are actually still doing the work that you should be doing.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, anything to add?
I better not. I'm not really in my head. Thank you. Anyone have any questions either about this topic or other topics? I guess we could roll out with a couple of more announcements, and then there's always a weird 30-second delay. So even if you have questions, we don't see them for a little minute. So is there anything you want to, what's coming up for us? We talked about what we did already, but.
Oh, well, our IXAF cohort 4 is kicking off this week.
Thursday.
Still time.
Is that tomorrow?
Yeah. Phew. Still time to get registered for that. If you have any questions about that, certainly let us know. You can send us a message on here or whatever the 700 other places that you can find us.
I would say too that a lot of the solutions that we're providing for clients now at the moment seems like a lot of retention challenges and reducing turnover. So if you know companies or organizations that are struggling with that, pass on our information. We have some really powerful statistics about people we've worked with and how we've helped them really turn around their turnover issues.
Yep. And if you have not yet jumped on Amazon and given the book a review, please do so. You can just click the star buttons. You don't have to write words. It doesn't have to be fancy or sentimental. You can just put stars on there. All the reviews really help us get to that bestseller status. So go do reviews on Amazon. It'd be super helpful. Friendly reminder, this is a closed Facebook group, but open to whomever wants to join, as long as you're not topless. We had some bots in here last week that we had to eradicate. So if you want to invite anyone to join our IX Ambassador Facebook group, please feel free to do so. We'd be happy to see them in here.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. Have a great week. We'll see you next Wednesday. Lead powerfully.
Change the world.
Bye.
Bye, guys.